Blueprints is a tough one to explain, and if you've seen it before, maybe you know what I'm talking about. It's a roguelike puzzle game, which doesn't sound like it makes any sense, but I promise it works. The game was made by Dogu Bomb, a team led by Tonda Ross, and has you playing as Simon Jones. Your great uncle, Herbert Sinclair, has died and left you his mansion under the condition that you can find the secret 46th room of the seemingly 45-room abode. The catch here is that the house changes every day. The mansion itself is represented by a grid, with each room taking up one square. Every time you click on a door to open it, you're prompted to pick one of 3 new rooms. These rooms can contain all kinds of different things, but usually contain some items like keys, which can be used to unlock doors or chests later, and gems, which can be used to draft better rooms occasionally. Sometimes a room will also contain a component for a puzzle that will come together as you keep playing and exploring more rooms. Certain rooms can only appear in certain parts of the house, and it seems like the further north you go, the more types of rooms you can find. Rooms don't always let you keep going though. Rooms have a set number of doors in set locations. One of these doors is always going to be where you enter the room. Rooms like the closet only have the one door, so it's effectively a dead end. Other rooms have more doors, but making sure that they line up isn't always so easy. If your door connects to the wall of another room, that door gets boarded up and you can't use it anymore. Getting further north isn't impossible, but it requires some careful planning and some careful decision making as you draft your rooms. Getting further into the house isn't the only thing to worry about though. First, you only have a limited number of steps per day. You lose 1 step each time you enter a room. You lose steps even when backtracking, so planning your route carefully to avoid backtracking when possible is extra important to preserve steps. Additionally, some of the later rooms will require extra steps to access, so some rooms require keys or require you to scan an ID card to unlock the door. Other rooms don't give you much if you haven't solved the puzzles from certain other previous rooms. For example, the breaker room doesn't do anything if you don't go to any of the rooms for which it controls the power. If you get to the garage early, for example, then get the breaker room later, you have to consider whether it's worth the steps to go back to the garage and see what's changed now that the power's on. This is kind of where the meta progression kicks in. The first time I turned the power on in the garage, I ran all the way back to see what I had unlocked. It might have been useless or it might have won me the game. I had no idea. But now that I did it once, I can bring that knowledge of that reward with me on my next run. Accessing the breaker room for the first time gave me the knowledge that it was related to the garage and that I should look to draft it. Accessing them both in the same run gave me the knowledge of what the reward was for revisiting the garage with the power on. Now on future runs I can draft with this in mind and decide whether the reward is worth drafting 2 dead-end rooms for. There's other kinds of meta progression though, and some of those features are a lot more overt. There's things like the gem mine or the shed that let you start each day with a small bonus. And then there's other things like the observatory room that you can draft. This room gives you a bonus based on how many times you've drafted that room across all of your runs. One of my favorite versions of this was the coat check. The coat check allows you, as you might have guessed, to check one of your items. That means you lose access to the item for the remainder of your current run, but in your next run, you can go to the coat check and pick it back up. Remember though, you have to draft the coat check to leave it, and then draft it again to pick it back up in a future run. This kind of decision making felt really fun while I was playing the game. The way your runs interact with each other made it feel less like a roguelike and more like one continuous time-warped experience that just looked like it reset every time you ran out of steps. Really though, the fact that each room contains pieces of puzzles is the primary form of meta progression in and of itself. On some runs, I was able to draft the payoff room for certain puzzles and get the reward without having to waste my steps or mess up my floor plan to get the rooms that contained the hints. I'd already seen them in previous runs, and since I remembered what they told me, I was able to skip straight to the prize. This left more doors open for me to draft other better rooms with my remaining doors. The game has a pretty fun story behind the initial premise as well, but the player hardly engages with it throughout a normal run. Towards the end of the game, it probably becomes a bigger deal, but most of your time spent with the story is relatively optional. The art style is very directional and I think complements the mechanics of the game well. It feels like you're living in a point-and-click mystery without any of the annoyance. The puzzles in the game are pretty tight as well, with enough clues scattered around that there's always something to think about without feeling like you have way too many things to keep track of. As far as I can tell, all the information you're given is actually useful too. Occasionally you'll get something that really is just lore, but for the most part the clues are obviously clues and they will be useful eventually. The game is also almost unnervingly quiet. There's barely any music, if any at all, and the lack of music lets the ambient sounds really shine through. Having some peace and quiet to think about the puzzles was also quite a nice touch, especially in a gaming landscape where everything feels like the virtual equivalent of jingling keys in a baby's face. Blueprints really encourages you to think and take it all in before you move on. In fact, they're counting on it. Learning and remembering is the only way to progress in this game, and the fact that the developers respect you enough to think that that's enough is refreshing. Overall, I don't see any reason not to try this game. I would say that the first 2 hours of this game may very well end up being its best 2 hours. That's not to say that the game doesn't continue being good, but it does feel like you can just pick this game up and immediately start having fun trying to solve the puzzles. As the game goes on and you play more runs, I think I could see it getting a little bit frustrating if you don't get the rooms that you feel like you need for a specific run, but this isn't an issue that you're going to run into when you start the game. At first, every new room is going to be super exciting and have something new to offer you, so it's really fun just to check out, even if you don't plan on playing it long term. I think that a lot of puzzle games seem overwhelming to me, especially just when I'm getting started, but Blueprints is definitely an exception. The game feels really friendly right at first glance. Sometimes you'll get into a room that feels like it's going to be really tricky, and it often is, but you're always given the tools to solve it, and even if you can't solve it right in that moment, because it's a roguelike game, you don't get stuck on that puzzle. You can just move on and come back to it later with like a fresh mind, fresh set of eyes. So even though the puzzles are tricky, it never feels like you are getting stuck or you need to solve something right now, or else you're just not going to be having a good time. There's always something new to be trying to do. There's always something old to go back to figure out, which I think serves as good proof that the roguelike and puzzle genre actually maybe make a pretty good match. I would definitely play another roguelike puzzle game after this one. Maybe Blueprints is special. It certainly felt special. I definitely think that this game is worth checking out. Blueprints is currently selling for $29.99 on Steam, which is a little bit steep of a price tag, but the game is very replayable if you get into it, and I've definitely seen the game on sale very, very often. I got the game for 34% off with the final price of $19.79.